But today we're talking about Dungeons and Dragon Age.
Timer said 10 and 30?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so you had to add the timers thing there, huh? I thought that would have been a great intro.
It still can be.
I'm not going to start the podcast with so we're going to set our timers up, right?
Well,
I am now that I'm lampshading it here.
Time's up.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Welcome to Story Mode, everybody.
Hey!
Yeah, it's me and Ben here today, and we're talking about Dragon Age. And kind of an interesting topic of conversation about Dragon Age, and sort of like how it's a little bit, not necessarily different, but like moving RPGs in a different direction.
I mean, I would definitely say it's different.
Okay.
Depending on what RPGs you're thinking of.
I just don't like putting out harsh words like that. Like, different.
I do.
And changed. To me, everything's just kind of and pretty something.
Sort of.
You'll know when I'm really gung-ho about an opinion, because it won't be preceded by like, oh yeah, it was pretty good. I just said it was good, and it's like, shit, that must have been fucking great.
Well, yeah, and you'll always know, and you'll notice this after a few story modes, Chris's octave goes lower when he's really like determined and serious about something.
Just for that, I'm going to be really serious about it right now. This is me being... Oh shit, I got something in my eye.
Now you know what I felt when you came in today.
No one understands that. Alright, so today, we're talking about story mode, and we're talking about Dragon Age.
Yeah.
And kind of a little bit more specifically about how Dragon Age as an RPG, more so than pretty much any, and I'd say more so than even Mass Effect kind of gives you control to a degree, but like really gives you kind of this directive control, like director's level of control over the kind of storytelling that you have in the game. Especially kind of across the series, because you play from one character to the next in different Dragon Age games, and you can carry over the the choices that you made from the previous game, and it affects your world state. And yeah, way more than I can't think of almost any other game that's really doing that.
The way I always felt about Mass Effect in versus Dragon Age is Mass Effect is testing the waters for what Dragon Age accomplished.
Kind of. And the other thing, too, is because Mass Effect you play as the same... I think this is actually probably one of those things I kind of forgot to mention. We'll talk a little about Mass Effect here, too, at the beginning, because it's appropriate.
Yeah, same company, same mindsets, and a lot of the same writers.
A lot of the same writers, a lot of the same developers, too.
That you can't ignore it.
But Mass Effect sort of... I'd say it's... Yeah, even though you get to make a lot of choices that sort of like, this is what the universe then looks like, it's still, a lot of it still feels more personal to Commander Shepard, especially since you play as Shepard the entire 3 games.
And you have the same cast of characters.
Yeah, and a lot, too, is, while there's some subtleties of character you can make to develop your character, that you're pretty much railroaded down Paragon Renegade, and it's not very interesting to try and find any sort of middle ground between the two. Like, you can do, like, a soft-hearted renegade in Mass Effect, which is kind of fun, where it's like, yeah, you're always throwing out, like, the harshest lines, but when it comes time to actually do the mean stuff, now you do the Paragon stuff, but because, like, you're always balanced on all that other renegade stuff, you're still a renegade. Which is actually kind of a fun way to play it.
Right. Well, and that's just the thing. When I first played Dragon Age, which is, as Chris reminded me before this started, is the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate, which is based off of... Dungeons and Dragons, which we'll get into later.
I didn't start by saying we're talking about Dungeons and Dragon Age for no reason, man.
And in Baldur's Gate, that's the old thing where you pick your alignment: lawful good, lawful neutral, chaotic, whatever it is. They have the old alignment system that you've probably seen memed everywhere now. Whereas Dragon Age doesn't give you that at all.
No, it's all characters. It's all based on how the other characters think of you.
And you can interact with characters differently to appease them. It's all like politics, if you will.
Yeah, if you haven't played Dragon Age, I don't know why you'd be listening to this extensively. But it's like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I know the first one did this, where it's like, you have personal sort of meters for every character, and when you do things they like, those meters go up, and you do things they go down. And like, if you happen to have Origins, you can cheat it by giving them like gifts from the DLC that just like, here, I've got max affection with you now.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because there are characters in the beginning of the Baldur's Gate that you get that are neutral and lawful evil that is based on your alignment, you will come into conflict with them.
Have you played Baldur's Gate? Because that's the one I have not. I've not actually played any of the old BioWare games before Mass Effect.
I've pretty much played... I think I've played every single BioWare game that they've ever put out.
Oh, really?
They're one of my favorite...
Including that Sonic one?
Yeah, I haven't.
I believe that after seeing the Sonic stuff. And
And yeah, they're just a company that's always appealed to me. I like them quite a bit, and Dragon Age is one of their strongest series. They
are great storytellers, and I don't know. Yeah, Dragon Age is right. It's my favorite fantasy, like fictional fantasy universe, especially like in any game series. I'd say I actually like it better than probably the Game of Thrones fictional universe, just a little.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about both.
And it's pretty much almost my favorite just fictional universe is probably right next to the Fallout universe.
Yeah.
I very much think that's really compelling, interesting.
And with Dragon Age, it is that whole... I can be the biggest dick in the world. I can be evil, if you will. But I can still have my friends.
Yeah, but not that you can be evil. You can hang on to it for games, too. Yeah. It's like you can have still been evil. The character you play in those games is still evil when you import it in because you keep all those choices.
Yeah.
This is the one thing, so I think Dragon Age that I like better about it than that Fallout doesn't have. Is Fallout is game to game, it always has to make decisions because it doesn't follow all the choices you made. Whereas Dragon Age is, they're at least trying. And in some ways, very impressively doing an interesting job.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we want to kind of sort of focus our conversation a little bit more on the way Dragon Age's mechanics kind of work on a meta level storytelling, and then sort of some very more specific moments that kind of give you the idea of, you're not so much having a story told at you in these games anymore as you get the power to sort of develop your own story. We've kind of mentioned actually last time in the Conquer's Bad Fur Day podcast about how I kind of was like, you could choose to be a character who's kind of a dick at the beginning, but then as the game goes on, you kind of change and shift, and you can get almost a better thematic storytelling out of that. And I think that Dragon Age is heading in that direction far more than almost any other RPG is going, because most RPGs is just like, no, you want to kind of pick one kind of style. Like Mass Effect in particular, sort of like, the best way to do it would be go to game, and like I'll be Renegade in the first one, and then Paragon in the second one, or Renegade in the first two, and then Paragon in the last one, and change between games. Because there's no real benefit to like deciding like having a moment in the in the third act, whereas shit, I should be a good guy, like it happens in most things, in most movies or books, and then having that kind of benefit. The only game I think you could get away with that is actually Fable.
Yeah,
because like you could decide like I remember like at least in the first one, I don't know if I played the other ones, where it's like you get most of the way through the game and there's at least an option to now I can trade in all my good karma for bad karma, or all my bad karma for good karma at this one point, and that I feel like is something that kind of miss, at least on a mechanic level.
Yeah,
finding some way to have a decision somewhere. It's like, no, I'm going to be this kind of person instead of this kind of person.
Well, and I think that one of the greatest things that helps, especially in the BioWare series of games, is that the characters have a voice outside of the first Dragon
Origins
Age.
doesn't have a
but the characters all have a voice. I mean, Shepard has a voice, whether male or female. Hawk has a voice. The Inquisitor has a voice. Even if you look at the massive online role-playing game of Tor, you have a voice. Do you?
I haven't played.
Everybody has a speaking line.
I haven't played the Old Republic either.
Yeah.
I've actually, I think the only BioWare games I played the Mass Effect trilogy and Dragon Age, and I'll probably play the new Mass Effect when it comes out.
Yeah.
Which is those risks. Yeah, we don't know who even the hero is. We haven't heard like who's. I don't know who's even the voice actors for that.
But there's something that adds a lot of power to the character and to round out a character, because by the end of Inquisition, I'm like, I know who this character is.
It's an interesting thing to maybe have discussed in a different kind of story mode, because it's one of those where it's one of the biggest complaints about Fallout 4 is shifting from the last two to Fallout 4 is now you have a voiced character. Yeah. Some of it might be the criticism is just not as well written as BioWare does their writing. But even then, I feel like it's actually one of those things where, you have a lot more choices in Origins of how you want your character to read and be than you do, especially in Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age 2, as opposed to Mass Effect, where you get Paragon and Renegon, you have pretty much the same thing, only you also don't have Snarky. Which is, by the way, if you haven't played Dragon Age 2 and you plan on it, play Snarky. It's the best. It is so much fun having some guy just go through a fantasy game in a completely sarcastic mode. People love Snarky Hawk.
I will have to do that when I play Dragon.
You will. Yeah. Yes, there's some of the best lines. Especially like especially when you have Varric, who's also just full of snark, and the two of them just going at it, like playing off each other. It's great. But again, that's sort of like, that's kind of what we're getting at is, that's sort of like the first thing. I'll kind of touch on some of the things we're going to talk about a bit, because I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons and how that kind of translates into Dragon Age and the way it influences your choices. But you can kind of get a sense just there. It's like, you can pick what kind of character you're playing as in the game. I'm going to play as the hero, the noble person, or I'm going to play as the snarky kind of like knight in sour armor, or I'm going to be the dick.
Yeah.
And as I said, there's like, and if you play a snarky guy, then you have some of these great extra back and forth with Varric.
Yeah.
It's just sort of, here's this one thing on its own. Some extra better storytelling out of just like a choice you may or may not have made. Whereas, like, I imagine, because this one was, unfortunately, even though I played most of these games multiple times, I still have a hard time going through and not picking, like, snarky. It's like, I'm going to be the dick this time. I was like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But it makes me wonder, like, if you play as, like, the dickish character, you might get along better with these kinds of characters. So a lot of it, too, is sort of, it's not just you being the director of the game, it's sort of you directing the game in a direction that you feel matches best to the way you view the world you're playing in. So, so we'll start kind of by talking about kind of a little bit of introduction, at least, because Ben kind of has some interesting things to talk about, how Dungeons and Dragons, and sort of really the best way to compare it is, you break down Dungeons and Dragons, you're the player, or you're the dungeon master.
Yeah, essentially, you have a group of 4 guys sitting around the table and one person at the center, which is the dungeon master.
Is there a limit? I have not played Dungeons and Dragons.
Minimum is usually 4. They usually recommend anything less can make things difficult, but usually 4, max 6. 6 has always been that golden number in a lot of RPGs as you kind of look at throughout things.
It would make sense considering that in Dragon Age you carry around you and 3 other party members.
Exactly. And Baldur's Gate used to be 6.
Oh.
So and in essence, they're the actors. They are in this performance, and
well, that's why I call it role playing.
Yeah,
it's like, it's the same thing as acting is role playing.
Yeah, and somebody at the table might really pull a dick move, Purtis, and really derail things. But there is one person at the center to really keep it all together and pull everybody back and keep the story moving.
The director.
The Dungeon Master, the director, the Dungeon Master, the Game Master, whatever you want to frickin' call him. The name keeps changing. Yeah, it used to be Dungeon Master strictly, and then all these other modes came out. It would be Game Master, GM, and then it became General Manager. No,
GM just makes things. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, and I just know it's the Dungeon Master.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that they needed another title.
Yeah. I've Dungeon Mastered a few times, which is crazy. You'd think I would do it more since I like to direct. But you do influence and you're playing off of each other, just as a director and an actor should play off of each other. But the director is there at the end of the day to keep the story moving forward and to do everything it can to tell the story. I
want to go to this bar for like the next 3 hours. That's not the part of the story that we're at. Yeah. We're leaving town. But I want to go to the bar and get drunk.
And if that happens, the GM's going to put in a character that is essentially, and we joke about this all the time, we'll be like, there's the DM character telling us to get back into the story, and so we will. Because otherwise we'll have to talk to this annoying character for the next hour.
And then this character came in and suicide bombed the bar. Now you can't go to... Can we go to the next town and find a bar there? You guys would hate playing Dungeons & Dragons for me. There's a reason I've never played it.
But yeah, in Dragon Age, I feel everybody, I think, would assume you'd be the role of the player or the actor. I honestly think you're the role of the Dungeon Master.
Yeah, this is particularly interesting because, Dragon Age kind of has this very easy line to draw from Dungeons and Dragons and its influence. If you look at it, you can already tell. Here's, all these monsters that are just pretty much from Dungeons and Dragons, just kind of reimagined their sources.
Yeah, Dragon Age actually does a really good job of reimagining that they're different.
I really don't have any idea what the Dungeons and Dragons universe is like, but I could tell you pretty much everything about Dragon Age.
Yeah.
And what the fate is and all that jazz.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm forgetting a lot of the words because it's been about a year since I last played one of them.
The Fate was one of them. You were right on that.
Well, I know what that is. I'm not gonna get them wrong. And Corypheus and the Deep Roads and all that.
Orzammar.
Kal Shirak.
But when Chris came to me with the story mode idea, he did phrase it as, you're basically your own director, and you really are.
Yeah.
You determine how the game plays out, even though there is one main story: defeat Corypheus.
Yeah, and we're kind of. although we're kind of focusing a lot on all the Dragon Ages, we're going to kind of, I think, more focus a little bit as we go on here on Inquisition.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I think Dragon Age has kind of gotten to this point where it's, instead of being like, yeah, the game is going to be the dungeon master and you're going to be the role player, the person playing, it's kind of starting to, like, meld these two roles together. Whereas, like, no, we actually have this thing, especially if you know how the systems work. Because some of them are either hidden from you. Like, you know, how do you get to pick who the next divine is at the end of Dragon Age Inquisition? If you know how it works, you can totally pick it yourself. It's just kind of hard to know it going in advance. You'd have to look it up. There are several things like this where it's like, yeah, the information on how to do it is easily available to find online. And even if you kind of break down the game and are paying attention, you'll be able to find it within the game and how the game mechanics work against you.
If you want to.
Yeah.
That's the greatest part about it.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, yeah, instead of being like, you have no control, and just like a story being told at you, and because the disadvantage of not having a dungeon master is they can't react to everything you're going to do. Instead, they hand you the tools to start being a little bit of the dungeon master yourself and go, well, I want to see the story kind of go down this route. I want to see it kind of this character move in this direction. And you kind of still get that in Mass Effect and some other games. There's like, yeah, you have characters, you know, you do their allies, and they have like, you know, missions that you do to see if they, you know, they'll approve of you or not. You can do the good thing and help them solve their problems, or just tell them to screw off and, you know, your problems of their own.
Yeah.
Leave them to die on a planet.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I did in Mass Effect once. I can't remember if I did that as a Renegade or a Paragon. Even.
Well, that might be the worst part.
The guy's a bad guy.
Yeah.
I believe is a
Cerberus?
No, it's the bounty hunter DLC character from Mass Effect 2.
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah, Zaid.
Who admittedly has one of the best laughs in the Citadel DLC if you hold on to him.
But
back to Dragon Age.
Yeah, back to Dragon Age. I was actually gonna bring it to another similar moment, not to jump straight into moments, but
no, go ahead.
So you go into the Fade in Inquisition. It's one of the main missions. You invade the Grey Warden stronghold because they've become corrupted.
It's sort of actually kind of like the middle point of the game.
Yeah, essentially.
It doesn't have to be. You can set it up to actually almost the very end.
Yeah, for me, that's kind of what it was.
Yeah, because the way you talk about it when you're playing it, but like. I'm almost entirely sure for me it happened pretty much right in the middle of my game, of my playthrough. And it's like, that's kind of probably where it usually leans what's happening.
And the other thing is you could choose to do that one before the Empress one. So that really impacts how you go through the game. And if you look at the level, like a suggested level, that one probably should have been
Yeah, because I think that one's like leveled like 10 levels lower than the other ones.
Like I blew right through it when I got to it. I was like, oh, alright. I was like level 24. Anyways, you get a moment when you go through the Fade. You were joined by 2 outside party members that do help you fight, which is a really cool thing because you usually have 3 people with you, and then you have these 2 guys with you as well. You have Stroud, who is a Grey Warden who was not corrupted, and then you have Hawk, who is the main character of the second game.
Well, it's particularly interesting. Is this the kind of point you wanted to get at? Is leading towards? Because it's not. You don't necessarily just have Stroud. You have Hawk, who's the character you played as in the previous game, and then you have one of 3 other Grey Wardens.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
And that very much depends on the choices that if you didn't import anything in the keep, because this is the other thing, you played the game without importing anything.
I defaulted it. Yeah.
It was the default world state. I've always gone to the Dragon Age keep and import like different world states because I want to see different style worlds. Depending on what you do with the default, what you import, you can end up with Alistair, a character you romanced and played with in the first game, or Loghain, another character who's like, you couldn't romance him, but you play as him. He's the antagonist of the first game, essentially. He's the main human antagonist.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like wildly different how these scenes can play out, and probably how you can be affected by them.
Yep.
On this, like, that's one of the biggest sort of like changes from game to game.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was starting to get towards, was when I got to that moment, you and I had very different conversations about how that scene went.
Yes, because when you then get to the end of this segment of the game, you have to choose which one of those people stays behind.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could see if you were someone who had Alistair and Hawk, how that you probably put down the game and walked away for an hour.
I could easily imagine you just stopping playing the game.
Like that's probably just a choice. Is like, what?
Yeah.
Why would you do this to me?
Yeah.
The character I played as in the last game, and the character I romanced in the game before that.
Yeah. And there's just the level of control you have over that moment is impressive. Whether you played the game or not, or went to the servers, I mean, that is the most key element, I think, is having that server available to you to go in and be like, these are the decisions I'm going to import it. You are literally creating the narrative. For like you would anything else as a director or as a dungeon master.
Yeah, that is pretty much how the keep works now. It's almost like, the director's journal of Dragon Age. It's like, so what are the kind of themes I want to have prepared for my thing now? And it's like you can essentially like look right up to that and go like, well, here's a slightly more effective story for this, and this character.
And I can only imagine how much harder that would make that scene. To choose which one stays and which one goes.
Because again, like, here's something that makes this scene, like, when you play it on the default world state, it's kind of like, meh, I don't know this character. Even if you knew who Stroud was, he's not a character that has a huge influence. Then every time he ends up, and like when I play through the game and he ends up being the Grey Warden with me, he's like, yeah, I'm going to sacrifice him because I want Hawk to live. Yeah. It's not a question. It's just this guy can stay behind. Hawk's the guy that's my playable character. I want him around. Whereas, if it was some of the other characters, I think there were times when I did choose to leave Hawk behind when it was the other characters. Yeah.
Although I don't know what I would do if it was Logain and Hawk. I feel like I'd sacrifice Logain just based on what I did in Dragon Age 1, but like I really don't know.
Because I did it with Logain. I think that was the one where I did sacrifice Hawk, and it's really interesting to see some of his reaction to it. Because I think he does have this thing with like, I should have died twice by now. I should be died twice over, and I'm still here.
Oh man. But yeah, because I can think of the decision in Mass Effect, which is the last time I put a game down because I had to walk away because you had Ashley and Caden. And for me, it wasn't about who was more valuable to me. To me, it was like I have to make a decision to permanently remove a party member, which is a thing I had not seen in a game before. And now Dragon Age gave you all the power and said, now you're going to pull your own trigger, essentially. With that moment being built up to the way it is. I'm like, I can't imagine being in that situation with Alistair and Hawk. Yeah. And that's what's so great about it. They're giving you all these tools.
Well, it's also, I think it's effective because I feel like it almost works more effectively having it to be characters that you don't have in your party. Because like when it comes down to characters in your party, it either is going to be like the character you like more, or... Well, I mean, that's probably still going to be affecting how you pick it. But it's like, it might be the character who's more mechanically advantageous for you. It's sort of like, this character sucks and this character is amazing, so I'm going to pick to save this character. Yeah.
Well, then you dropped a bomb on me when it came later in the game at the Statue of Mythal.
Oh, yeah.
That one blew my mind.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to that in a minute, because that's kind of what I wanted to build up towards. It's sort of like, because that was sort of, to me, the sort of thesis statement moment that, like, to me kind of built it up in my head. It's like, because this is a moment for me that played out very differently, at least in my head, than I imagined for other people. But there are a couple of things I want to talk about, like how effectively you can kind of create and craft a story around you or a world around you that may or may not, like, that's better than others. Yeah. And a lot of that, too, is, like, just picking what characters you bring with you on what quests.
Yeah, exactly. I had Dorian in my party the whole time, and which I kind of wish I mixed and matched it, but you will have vastly different conversations.
Yeah, because a lot of too is like, if you like the snarkier characters, you bring the snarkier, it's going to be more of a humorous kind of like game. It's like if you bring the brooding characters, and you're going to get more of a brooding game. If you bring the brooding and the snarking characters, you're going to have the snarking characters, making fun of the broody characters. Yeah. It's kind of, it's interesting because it's like, it's sort of like, you're doing your own casting, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is like, here's the adventure I'm going on today, and here's the cast I'm bringing with me. Mm-hmm. And I get to choose. It's like, you even get to choose in the Inquisition, like, your own person what the cast is. It's like, I get to pick the voice and the race of my character. To which is another thing is like, this would probably must be like just first sort of kind of without saying, but it's like, depending on what voice you pick in Inquisition, you get a better performance. Yeah. Like, way better performance.
I can imagine that.
Which did you pick for your playthrough? I'm guessing British male.
I think so. I think that, because I can't remember the other voice actors.
Because I think that was the one I picked the first time too. And
it's Troy Baker, isn't it?
No. It's some guy. I think he's never been in anything actually. Oh. Like, it's one of his first things. And he's average. I think the American female is probably is the weakest. Yeah. Whereas the American male is actually very strong. Okay. And it's the same guy who voices Zevran. Huh. Is the same guy as his American voice.
From the first game.
But the strongest one by far is the British female voice. Okay. Really, like, any direction you push that character in, she's really impressive. Which also makes sense because she's been in, like, every BioWare game. Yeah. She's a trainer in Mass Effect 3.
Huh.
You're like assistant.
Yeah.
But like it's one of those things where it's just like just that little bit. Interestingly, Hawk is one of those I have a hard time being able to pull out, which like because I feel like Shepard is one of those that's really easy. It's like Femme Shep is way better performed than Male Shep, with the exception of when you get to the Citadel DLC. Male Shepard actually does some of the comedy way better than Female Shepard. Is about the only thing. Whereas Hawk, they're almost exactly even. You're really not like they're both really well done, and each have their own kind of strengths and weaknesses behind how they read. How they read. Although I haven't done like either one is sort of like the dickish character. So I don't know if one of them made as better as that. But they both do Snarky Hawk amazingly. But it's just something like that. Like, yeah, you could pick certain characters. But it's not only just that, but this is something I kind of came... Well, yeah?
Well, I was just going to ask, because I'm thinking about it more, and I've been wondering this since I beat Inquisition. If I changed to the American male...
Yeah.
Would his lines be differently written as he would speak them? Or is it just the same lines, just a different inflection?
It's pretty much the same lines. It's like there might be inflection differences. They might deliver them differently.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't know, there's some ways...
It's been another thing that's been really fun about, playing actually Fallout 4 in two different ways is sometimes the it's another one that's where it's the male and female, they're just about evenly done. I think the female's slightly stronger in certain areas, but there are some great deliveries of lines from the male in that too that's just kind of completely catch me off guard.
Okay, yeah, because I've been trying to think about that, like how deep does this rabbit hole go? But
no, it is pretty much just delivery and how they deliver lines. But again, that's you just watch any like remake or something like that. You can kind of get a sense of like, or here as you're talking about Suicide Squad and the bad Joker, it's like it's just the same thing. It's like it's all people different playing the same thing. It's just fair. Different lines.
That's fair.
So for those of you who thought the Joker that Jared Leto did was amazing, call Ben out on it. I didn't see Suicide Squad. Yeah,
please call me out on it. I will fight you.
But what I was kind of getting at before is it's not just like what characters you pick to bring on with you at certain times, but it's also sort of... Inquisition actually even breaks it down even further too. Sometimes the story, how well the story being told at you, comes down to what order you talk to your characters in during break times between quests.
Yeah.
Because one of the big things it gives you is these cinema scenes with these characters. Mm-hmm. Especially once you've done like their personal quest and gotten them all approved or not, you get like one final big scene. And one of the best ones, I'm sure people who play Dragon Age, especially if you played it more than once, will probably almost know exactly where I'm going with this as I start to talk about it. But one of the scenes that you get from Varric is just this big scene, like kind of party scene with all the other playable characters except for like 2.
Yeah, like Vivian wasn't there for that.
Which would make sense from what they're doing because they're playing like a drinking card game, gambling.
Yeah.
And it's just this really fun scene that's just like all of the characters that you've been gathering around, getting together, sitting down and having a good time. I guarantee you, if you've replayed that game, you save that scene for the end.
Yeah.
You intentionally don't talk to Varric after you finish his personal quest, just so you can save that scene for just before the end. That's you doing your own directing.
Yeah.
It's actually more you doing your own editing. But even then, that's the power of the director. It's sort of like, I want to make sure that this like real high point of the story happens at just before the climax, because that's the appropriate moment for this story to happen. Whereas it feels much less appropriate when it happens if it happens just in the middle of the story and I still got all this stuff to do. It feels just so much less significant. There's other moments like that too. There's Sarah's final scene is like you sit up on top of a roof with her eating cookies I think she made, and she's trying to figure out how to make cookies, and there's this whole interesting conversation about it, and it was one of those things where I didn't feel much about it, that scene, until I was doing it with actually my Kunari male with the American male voice. So it was like almost like her big brother kind of thing scene going on, and it also happened it was like the very last thing, because I had forgotten about it. It was actually the very last thing I did. I had the Varric scene, and then I had her scene, and then I fought Corypheus. And there was something really particular about that scene. I don't think you've seen it.
I didn't.
I'd say just try and find a way to watch it on the internet. But there's something really affecting about having that scene happen right there, because it's probably one of the most just like calling it like a big brother, little sister. It feels just very familial, that scene, and just something about it feels very sweet, whereas the other one's just like, this is really happy, this like nice, relaxed, laid back scene. There's something about this one happening just before the finale that feels like this is really just sweet and kind of driving home a lot of themes. I think it might have been too because it's sort of here you give an opportunity for this, the Inquisitor you played as, especially if I was playing as a Kunari, who's a character who maybe was bullied around or pushed around, not really given a whole lot of credence to like being the leader in the first place, and now they're the leader and they're in charge, and they're just being this soft-hearted like good guy to like one of the kind of hardest to get along with characters in your group. It just feels just like this is a character. This was character growth, even if I didn't necessarily see all of it. I feel like it was imbued in there just by the order in which my scenes happened, even if I didn't necessarily choose them. But you can go through and choose them.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things like now knowing what I know. I would structure things differently, but it did work out perfectly for me because of the way that the main plot is structured. Like that last fight with Corypheus is very climactic. The way it's set up is just like you go into it and you go, this is it. This is the final bout. And I was really satisfied that right before it, I had that party scene with Varric. I had a great scene with Cole.
Yeah, because it was one of those things where, as you mentioned, like you left doing the Grey Wardens thing till like the very end. You did the Orlesian stuff first, because that's how you get his quest, is you did the stuff with the Grey Wardens. That's how it unlocks. So, that would have been way at the end, because it would have been the last things you did.
And, I mean, it was kind of cool for me to do the Grey Warden stuff, because you could do a couple side quests involving the Grey Wardens before you go do that main story quest. Yeah. Which actually it's just all these pieces of a puzzle come together that just get fully formed when you go into it, if that's the route you want to take it. I wonder how those quests would have played out had I gone to the Warden's Fortress and then elsewhere to see how everything would have played out. They give you everything to make this what you want to make it. Yeah. And
a lot of it too is just going to be dependent on like what kind of race your character is and stuff like that.
But I think the strongest thing about it is like how the whole beginning of the game when you're in Haven, a lot of it you don't get a whole lot of freedom to do a lot of stuff until you get the Skyhold, I feel. And that's what's so great about what happens at Haven. You have your first major decision. Do I save the mages and give them a second chance at life? Or do I save the Templars and try to keep the status quo going as best as I can?
Yeah, which is another one of those really interesting notes where it's like you actually have to choose like what game, like
you both have pros and cons.
One quest that you're not going to do for the game. Yeah, which is a very interesting way to design a game, is to have one whole quest. Like, if you want to play this, you have to go and replay the whole. Go back or just save just before you do it, so you can play both of them.
And then you get the Skyhold with a really cool siege. You meet the villain of the game.
That whole sequence is really well done.
You have a really great back and forth depending on your dialogue choices between you and the villain.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Is it comes down to just dialogue choices sometimes. Yep. It's like, okay, that was not very effective. I think there's this one where it's like, and again, not only dialogue choices, but too like which character you pick, because like sometimes it's like this dialogue choice is really effective by the American male and the British male, but this one didn't deliver, but they do deliver this one really good. Like, the one thing I noticed that the American female does do really good, if you play more of a hardliner, a hard ass, her readings are a lot better. Huh. Whereas, like, just the British one is just great because it's pretty much all around. Anyone you pick is going to sound really great. And the American male sounds really great, so like the big brother kind of like, I'm the good guy kind of character. Just, he's a really good job at that.
But then you get that scene where you're outside, everybody's trying to collect their wits, and it's just this beautiful moment where everybody starts singing, and you're just starting to feel hope again. And what I like that BioWare did was it pretty much structured this first part of the game to be like, okay, now you see what you're working with. Here are all the tools that we use to make that happen, and we're putting them in your hands. To then have the Varric party scene, to then have the Sarah, because I felt the same way. As I did in that moment when I'm sitting around the table, I'm like, my smile is from ear to ear as I'm watching these people play cards. Yeah. And it was just really great. Even if it didn't happen right before the end of the game, I was so lucky that it did. We talked about agency for an entire story mode, and to have it just handed to you in such a way was impressive.
Well, it's just like, it's sort of like, it's in a weird way, BioWare can't stop giving you agency. Yeah. It's like, if you don't think it's there, you're not looking hard enough. Yeah. Maybe you can argue at the end of Mass Effect 3. Yeah. There are compelling cases, but like in case of Dragon Age, it's sort of like, if you don't feel like there's agency, you're probably not looking for it hard enough. Yeah. Or it's because it's like they're handing it to you right in your face. Mm-hmm. You get to decide everything. You get to decide what your character's like and all this. If your story sucks, you probably made it that way. Right. Which kind of is like, which leads me towards sort of kind of the point that I wanted to... What made me really start to think about Dragon Age in this way is the idea of like, you're the director, you're not, it's not just a story being told at you, it's a story that you're helping tell. That's really what a director's job is you're handed a script, And you get to decide, well, these are the moments I want to string on the most. These are the character beats I want to really kind of get into this character. While this character does this, I want them to start out as this kind of character and end as this kind of character. That's all the kind of stuff that a director gets to decide, not so much the writer, because they have to kind of move it from being on a piece of paper to being something that you see,
by
that you watch.
People,
yeah, that was performed at a certain points, maybe all chopped up, but you know, it's this whole kind of breakdown. So that's what you get to be. And the moment for me was, and it's one of those. It's very different depending on what choices you. That mostly in the first game is when you meet Mythal towards the end of the game in Dragon Age Inquisition. Because when I did it, and when you did it, because I think this is actually pretty much the same in the default world state, was the same when I did, it's kind of dependent on whether or not you had a kid with Morrigan in the first game. Because if you do, she has a kid. There's an extra character in the game that you can meet, who's actually voiced by Claudia Black's kid. Her son does the voice of her kid in the game, which was interesting to see.
Yeah.
If she does have a kid, like, her character is different, like the way she's characterized. Because in the first time I played through Origins, I didn't really like her very much.
Okay.
It's one of those where it's I can see where they're going with her character, and as I played more and played different kinds of characters through Origins, I like her a lot more. I like her as a character, but I don't like her as a person, perhaps, I guess you'd say, as much as I like palling around with Leliana in that game.
Yeah.
Or Alistair or Zavron, like some of the more fun-loving characters. Whereas I know that you don't like Leliana very much.
No. Not in any of the games. I understand her. I think her as a character is pretty well rounded and written. I just don't care for her.
Yeah, that's fair. But that's kind of what they give you the power to have, is beside, I don't like these characters, I'm not going to spend as much time with them.
Yeah,
or I don't like these characters as much, I want to see them learn a lesson.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm kind of getting at here. So I didn't like Morgan. At the end of the game in Origins, she presents you with a choice. It's like, what you find out is you have to die at the end of the game unless you go through this ritual with her, which is just basically you have sex with her, and then the baby that you conceive will essentially not necessarily take your spot, but will absorb sort of the killing blow that you take to a degree. The kid doesn't die, but you don't die either. It's what saves your life. It's more complex, but I don't want to get too into it if you're not very familiar with it. So you can say yes or you can say no. You obviously plays a different character, so it's you may not ever meet him. And yeah, because you can live through it even if you say no to her, because usually how I do it in Origins is I recruit Loghain and let him take the killing blow, so that I live through the thing and then someone still dies, but there's no then...
you could even have Alistair take the killing blow.
You could, and if you romance him, he takes it for you if you bring him with you.
Yeah.
You don't get to choose.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
So she may or may not have a kid. So for me in my playthrough, she didn't. And she was still pretty much the same kind of dickish character to me in Inquisition that she was in Origins, that I didn't care for very much. There's just I'm just so tired of you. So in this moment, this is huge spoilers if you haven't played Dragon Age Inquisition. You want to right now. If you've been listening this whole time, now is the moment to stop and be like, shit, well, I gotta go and play and beat this game. Because what happens is, you're at almost the very end of this game, and you decide, well, we need to go and contact this superpower, this power Mythal. It's somewhere kind of out there.
Yeah, it's hard to even call her a god.
Yeah, it's sort of closest thing demigod or something like that.
Yeah.
And when you go out there, and she shows up, it turns out to be Morrigan's mother, who is from the first game, who's one of the first characters you meet, who she hates.
Yes.
And the other choice that you get just before that is whether or not you drink from this mythical well of hers. And if it's you or Morgan who drinks from it, and if you drink from it, you become Mythal's slave, and if she drinks from it, she does. So it's just this beautiful moment for me, for a character who I didn't care much for up to, especially in the playthrough that I was going, who in this exact moment just realizes everything she ever wanted is something she doesn't want at all. And it's just that is thematically powerful, and thematically powerful to be watching.
Yeah.
And it's just and it was just one of the few moments where it's just as you kind of described this big smile, it's not only just this big smile, it just felt so rewarding, because it's not just something that happened that was I liked seeing in a story, in sort of storytelling, but it's just I felt I built it to that point. I felt I directed the story to that point.
Yeah.
Not so much the story just ended up there. It's like, no, the choices I made taught Morgan a lesson.
Yeah.
Screw you. But then you feel really bad about it if you go the other way, because it's like, then it's kind of the opposite. Where if I'm talking about, you know, characters changing, if you give that character that chance to change, and you do this ritual with her, or you can do it, she can have a kid anyway without you doing the ritual.
Yes.
If you romance her, but you still say no to the ritual.
Yes.
She's
Which is
still
what
a
I did.
kid. Really?
Well, my first playthrough,
that's right.
yeah.
You imported default. You didn't actually make a Dragon Age. Okay. Because if you do that, she'll still have a kid. I don't know if the scene changes at all. I don't think it really does. I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. Because you can have a kid who's not like special, who's just like your kid, the kid of the Grey Warden, Morgan.
Right.
And instead, the scene is, you know, more like her mother is like there for the kid, not her. And like Morgan almost steps up to like just be like sacrifice herself for her son. And it's like, you know, I would, you know, and sort of like one of like the biggest things is she wants to be everything for her son that her mother wasn't for her.
Right.
It's sort of like one of her big things. And like, again, totally different direction. But if you're leaning this way and you like Morgan and you want to see her grow as a character, just another amazingly well thematically written point. And it's just like, you know, it's just what BioWare has done a very good job. And it's like one of those sorts, you know, I think it's sometimes underappreciated how well they write.
Yeah.
To get something like that, where you have two completely separate universes, they're opposite universes, they're parallel universes to each other, that are almost equally thematically just resonant.
Yeah.
It really depends on what you want to see. And you get to be that director. You get to choose, I like these thematics. I like these ones. So it's like, part of me is like, yeah, if you play a BioWare game and you get kind of a lousier story told at you, it's probably because you're telling yourself a lousy story.
Yeah.
Suck it.
Yeah, and I was going to say not to be a dick about it, but yeah, I mean, it's the beautiful thing about these BioWare games is like you get to decide what kind of story you want. Even Mass Effect, for the most part, you do get to decide what kind of story you want. But Dragon Age especially, you and I had very different experiences.
Yeah.
And that's awesome to compare our stories.
I mean, it even comes down to, like, think of the way you can play the very end scene of Dragon Age Inquisition. Whereas the end scene is a party. It's like everyone's won, and you get to, like, you're in the grand hall of your keep, of your castle, and you can go and you can talk to all your, your friends or whatever. Or you cannot. You can just be like the silent brooding. There's just dumb little things like that. And at that point too, it's like maybe your romance is still there, and you go and meet him upstairs. It's just there's so many little things about how you can choose to. Yeah, and a lot of these games offer this too. But I feel like BioWare and the Dragon Age series offers it to a much greater degree. And a lot of it comes from the keep, the Dragon Age keep. I can go like, and I know, and it's kind of where it's like even if you play through Inquisition, you make choices in the end you don't want to carry over into your Dragon Age 4 whenever that comes out. Now I can go into the keep and change that too. It's like, this was more the canon I was going for. This was.
Yep.
And it even goes beyond that. Is like one of my favorite things to do is I've played Inquisition probably about 4 times.
Wow.
I am necessarily 100% every time. It's
Sure.
usually just like, I'll do the main quest missions and then a couple of like the more fun side ones because it actually doesn't take very long. Is kind of constructing what's the backstory world like for the one this character's stepping into. Did I have a dwarf Grey Warden and then Hawk was a mage, or I had an elf, Dalish elf or city elf Grey Warden and Hawk was just a nobody rogue who had no special powers or nothing like that. It's very interesting how you can kind of like even create within just those sort of choices infinitely complex world states and just some things that are way more thematically interesting than others. You go back to Origins, the idea of I think probably thematically the most interesting race you can play as is a city elf.
Yeah.
Because here's someone who's just like has
you get shit on the entire game.
Even more so than like castless dwarfs you can play as too. Because even that one is sort of like, well, you could run away and make a new life for yourself. You don't get to do that. As
the only people who kind of shit on you in that scenario are maybe other dwarves.
Yeah.
Everybody else is like, oh, okay, cool, a dwarf.
But then you get to this taste of power, and it's like I remember playing through because when I did my city, I did a city elf playthrough as Origins, and it's one of those where I actually like leaned far more towards sinister and evil, and not necessarily like evil, but like power hungry, or like just intentionally like leaving places in worse state than they were, with the idea that no, I want to make things so that the city elves can kind of step up and actually gain some power at the end of this, find some sort of foothold rather than just helping everyone else keep theirs. And it's just sort of like it's just things like that that like you can build that and then lead from that story into the other ones, and like you can keep all those choices. It's kind of amazing.
I am going to be very excited to see where they take this universe. I mean, I really hope
that they haven't decided to say end it at a trilogy and that they keep it going.
No, there's again the way they developed Dragon Age Inquisition. There's no way, but I'm surprised we haven't seen anything about the new Dragon Age.
You know, they're quiet right now, which means they're working on something. So, other than Andromeda, but
which is last I saw now, like first quarter next year. I'll be patient.
They can take as much time as they want, honestly.
Well, not as much. They can take your time, but I want to play it eventually, please. Like, I don't... We can find some balance between how things are going right now, where when you pick a date and it comes out on that date, no matter what anyone says, and the late 90s, where Nintendo would say, oh yeah, it's coming out this day, and then they'd be like 2 days before, it's like, sorry guys, we're delaying it 4 months.
Yeah.
Just like, god damn it, Nintendo. I just want to play Banjo-Kazooie. It looks great. Why won't you let me buy it? You said it would be done by now.
But it is one of those things that with every Dragon Age game we've seen so far that I know that this 4th game will put me in a position to continue to influence.
Possibly. It'd be interesting to see what you think of, because you haven't played Dragon Age 2.
No.
And Dragon Age 2 is actually... I have a note in here, as I was talking about, like, you know, how much kind of control you get over it. Is it more personal? Is it more like, you know, on a big scale? Dragon Age 2 really doesn't give you that much. It's a lot more of a character-driven kind of thing. To which I think, to a degree, it has a much more focused and interesting story. Like, I think you can end up in that situation where you're having a less interesting or less thematically resonant story told at you in Dragon Age 2. But at the same time, if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. You don't really get to choose something different.
Yeah. And maybe that will be the next game. Maybe not. I hope that BioWare sticks to what really worked in Inquisition.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see them go back to some of the stuff that I thought really worked in Dragon Age 2. Because the one thing I really liked about that was you kind of, although they never really changed the world as you go through it in the acts, you know, you have 3 acts, you play in the same city for 10 years, essentially, and just time gaps between them is like, that's really cool on its face value.
Yeah.
I'd like to see, like, take that the next step. And, like, the city changes, or you get these extra zones of the city to now explore in these years because they got constructed, or, you know, stuff like that. Because it's pretty much the exact same map. It's just like, oh, now it's, you know, reset or something. It's like, yeah.
I will say, you know, not to start to wrap things up and put it on a bow.
Well, we should.
The biggest thing I learned from this is that I lied to you at the beginning. Chris actually raises an octave when he gets really excited and passionate about stuff.
Is that true?
But no. But I don't know how to better conclude this and say that, like, there was nothing more fun than having that much agency and be able to create your own story. Do I want it in every game? No. I do love games like The Last of Us and, you know, the Uncharted series where it is a narrative going straight through.
I think part of, like, being able to have, like, the best story told at you in a game is being able to gauge how much role-playing you're supposed to be doing with it.
Exactly.
You know, when you sit down and play something like, The Last of Us, you're gonna get a lot more out of it if you kind of get yourself into the character mindset of Joel. It's like, you know, but the game helps you do that too through the gameplay.
Yeah.
You know, Dragon Age gives you a lot more kind of freedom. It's like, you know, I can kind of choose what kind of mindset I want from my character. I can be sort of somewhat bitter and cynical about the world, or I can be really hopeful about it.
Yeah.
And I get to pick that. And a lot of that may be dependent on, you know, again, what race I picked. Because if I pick an elf, I'm probably likely just going to be cynical. But maybe I'm going to play it as like, no, I'm hopeful. I want to see things get better, even though that's not the kind of typical thing for a person like, you know, character like me in this thing.
So
and you can make that work to a degree. Whereas, you know, again, like you could be a hopeful Joel.
Yeah, right. So thanks for listening to us go on again about another story mode.
Thank you for listening to Insightful Story Mode. I'm gonna get that right sometime.
Yeah, and if you disagree with us on anything, please, like always, comments.
Tell us you're just arrogant bastards because it might be true. I don't know. I am
true.
right though. But if even if you want to share any of your choices that happen in Dragon Age, I would love to hear them because there are things I don't know about.
Yeah, please. If you have like moments that for you, because like we were kind of describing some moments for us, like this really hit me as I loved the story moment and I felt I helped create it.
Yeah.
I would love to hear and read some things like that from people listening to this now. Is like, oh yeah, and I had this moment from Dragon Age, any of the Dragon Ages that you felt like, I made these decisions and I got to this point. Especially anyone who happened to play and get Alistair and Hawk and had to choose them and tell us what that was like.
Yeah, in which I will start off and say, I am so sorry that you had to go through that. But yeah, like...
You don't have to apologize. It's like, Bioware did that on purpose. Someone somewhere was like, it's a great idea. And they wrote that down, and someone was just like, oh my god, that's so awful, we have to do it. Although this is coming from the same game that decided to finally have a romance that breaks your heart.
Yeah.
Oh, and talk about, like, again, just great storytelling. You may hate Solus to the ends of the earth for what he does, but it's still just a fantastically told romance. Because it's not. I loved, yes, everything about having my heart broken in that game. I had my heart broken and it made me feel wonderful. But thank you very much.
The abuse.
Yes.
Thank you very much for listening to Story Mode. Join us next time where we're going to talk about the Final Fantasy single-player games, not the MMOs, and possibly try and rank them akin to how we did Zelda previously.
I feel like it'll be easier, but I know I will be surprised.
Yeah, if you want to hear some arguments, next week's the time to try and possibly get some.
To tune in, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Later.